There's a moment in many successful careers that almost nobody talks about. It's the moment when the things that made you successful stop working the way they used to. You're still capable, still respected, and still producing results. But something subtle changes, and if you've ever been here, you know exactly what I mean. It doesn't feel like failure. It feels like something inside of you is asking for a different way of leading. So why does working harder stop being the answer? And why does it feel like you can see something others don't, but struggle to fully explain it? That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome back to your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand. I'm Lisa McGuire, Strategic Identity Advisor. And this episode is part 5 of a series I've been recording called the Identity Evolution Series. The Identity Evolution Series isn't just a set of ideas. It's a pattern I've seen over and over again in the lives of high-achieving people. And if you've been following along, you've likely felt yourself somewhere inside of it. Episodes 1 through 4 were about what I call the internal disruption. Something starts to feel off. Identity becomes unstable. Clarity disappears, and you reach the edge. Episode 1 was about telling the truth, to see where you've not been only performing not for others, but also for yourself. Episode 2 introduced the idea of what I call successfully stuck. When you recognize the identity of the person who created your success is no longer aligned by who you are. Episode 3 reveals the identity eclipse, when your front-facing identity exists alongside the new identity that's emerging. Which brought us to episode 4. It's the reinvention ridge, where you come to the top of the climb and you run out of road. But you have to keep moving. But where? And what most people don't realize is this. This isn't something that happens only once. If you are committed to someone who is growing, this cycle will happen again and again. And because you start to make meaning of your life, your identity evolves. And that brings us to where we are today. This episode is about what happens after the ridge. This is the pivot point, the internal shift. You might be in this phase if you're still capable, but things that used to feel natural are now feeling forced. You find yourself explaining things that don't actually feel true anymore. You can see what's wrong, but you struggle to get others to see it. You're working harder, but it's not creating the same momentum. Or maybe this is the simplest way to say it. You can still do what you've always done. It just doesn't feel like the right use of you anymore. Before we go further, I want to pause for a moment and share something with you. This episode is sponsored by a methodology I created called the category of only. And I want to be really transparent about this. Most of the people I work with don't come to me when something is broken. They come to me when everything still works, but something no longer feels true. They're still capable, still respected, still producing results. But internally, they're standing at this exact moment where they can feel something shifting, where they can see things differently than they used to, but they haven't fully trusted it yet. Category of only is the process I use to help people make sense of that moment. Not by giving them more strategy, but by helping them recognize the authority their life has already been building and translate that into a clear direction for what comes next. We'll come back to that later. But first, I want to show you what this shift actually looks like in real life. I want to share something a bit more personal here, because this isn't just something I teach. It's something I've lived, and recently I went through what I now call my reckoning week. It was a week where I started to see patterns I could not unsee. Places where I would walk into a room, read the room, and soften my voice so I would belong, so I wouldn't offend, so I would be accepted. And the truth is, I wasn't just doing that in rooms. I was doing it in my content, in my business, in how I showed up. And once I saw it, I started seeing it everywhere, not just in me, but in others too. People performing versions of themselves instead of being who they actually are. And that's when something clicked for me. I realized why I had started to see personal branding differently. not as expression, but as performance, as wearing a mask of who you think others want you to be, to fit into their world and to find favor with them. And at the same time, I felt this growing pull towards something else, authentic presence. And now that I'm on the other side of it, that pull wasn't just an idea. It was calling me out. That was episode 1 in real life, telling the truth, calling out what I was seeing. Then came the next phase, successfully stuck, when I realized that the version of me I'd been presenting wasn't the full truth of who I am. And I see this all the time. People living a life of success they were told to build, but it no longer feels like them. Sometimes it never did. And that misalignment, people sit with it for years, sometimes even decades. The person they really are lives underneath the surface of who they came here to be. Then came the identity eclipse. 2 identities, one that works from the outside and one that's emerging underneath. And I knew I couldn't keep performing. I could not stay there. That's when I hit the reinvention ridge, where the identity that built your success runs out of road. And the only way forward is to find a new path and keep walking. And that brings us here, this moment, this shift, where you begin to identify what actually needs to change and start putting it into motion. For me, that looked like looking at every component of my life and my business. Nothing was off the table. Everything was open to scrutiny. And the whole time, there was this version of me, my future self, right here beside me. Not judging and not rushing, just steady and patiently waiting for me to discover what she had known all along. Now, I don't want to minimize this part because from the outside, this can look brave, decisive, and even courageous. But from the inside, it doesn't feel optional. It doesn't feel like you no longer have a choice. And this is where the leadership actually changes. Not at the level of strategy. It shows up at the level of identity. Because you can't outperform this moment. You can't think your way out of it. You can't work harder to fix it. You have to see differently. There is a shift. Early in your career, you are paid to explain reality. But at a certain point, you are paid to see reality before others do. And that's a different kind of leadership. And if I'm honest with myself, this is something I'm still learning in real time. Seeing something is one thing, but trusting it, that's where the real work begins. And I think this matters even more right now, where we are today, because as the world becomes more unpredictable, we naturally start looking for answers outside of ourselves. We look for more strategy. We want more data. We crave more certainty. But what I'm seeing is the opposite is required. We're being pulled back to ourselves, to our own awareness, to what we can see. So let me ask you something. What are you seeing right now that you haven't fully trusted yet? Where are you still trying to explain yourself instead of expressing what you know? Because when you begin to trust what you see, something powerful happens. A new question emerges. What is the unique perspective my experience has given me? And that is where we're going next. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the category of only, the moment where identity becomes authority, where everything you've lived starts to come into focus. It's the clarity people crave. It's the difference that only you can own. It's the core identity beneath the brand, so every strategic decision flows from who you are, not how you compare. And that, my friend, is how you become magnetic and stand out in the marketplace. Thank you for being with me today, and if you don't want to miss the rest of this series, be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll find that subscribe button right below. We're not done yet, so thanks for being with me today. I'll see you here next week.